Hello and a very warm welcome indeed to Quadriga, coming to you from the heart of the German capital, Berlin. And today we're looking at the latest developments in Turkey, where a major crackdown on the media has been taking place in the aftermath of the failed July the 15th coup. Some journalists, like Can Dündar, the editor-in-chief of the centre-left newspaper Cumhuriyet, have been forced into exile. Meanwhile, international media outlets are also coming under pressure, including a Deutsche Welle team that recently had its material confiscated after presenter Michel Friedman conducted a critical interview with a Turkish minister. So today we've decided here on Quadriga to focus on the future of the freedom of the press in Turkey. And to do just that, I'm joined here in the studio by three excellent analysts and commentators. Beginning with Michel Friedman, who was, as we've already mentioned, with that DW team that was a victim of harassment in Ankara. He says what happened to Deutsche Welle's team is clearly an indication that press freedom in Turkey is more theory than reality. Michel is nodding. Also with us is Alan Posner, regular columnist with the Berlin daily Die Welt. Alan warns here in Germany, every newspaper article has to be submitted for authorisation, so we should be very cautious indeed about criticising other countries. And also today we are joined by Gökçen Beyinli. She's a freelance journalist and an academic who says the press was scarcely free in Turkey before the 15th of July coup attempt. Now it is totally under strict control. Thank you all for joining me here today on Quadriga. I'd like to begin with you, Michel Friedman, because you were in Ankara at the heart of that incident as the Deutsche Welle team had its material confiscated after an interview with a Turkish minister. I'd like to ask you, when the material was confiscated and when you realised what was happening, to what extent did you feel that you were in an authoritarian state? Perhaps even what some people might call a dictatorial state, a state where the freedom of the press no longer exists?
My spontaneous reaction would have been, let me say, in Germany, in France, in Great Britain, I'm calling the police. The police is there to protect me, and a minister is not more than I am, not less. We are on the same level. I'm calling the police because at least it was a robbery. Somebody took our material. It was our team, the Deutsche Welle said, and paid for this material. And I felt immediately that this is not an option. Latestly then, you know where you are, that you are not anymore in a democracy, that you are not anymore in a country where check and balances for an individual are practicable. From this moment on, I understood what happened in Turkey towards journalists, intellectuals, artists, name them, before the coup and even more after the coup.
Let's just bring in Gökçen Beyinli, because you were nodding. I could see you nodding when Michel Friedman was talking about the fact that he didn't feel as though he had that option to simply phone the police.
Well, I was wondering what would be the case, for instance, if that happened in a democratic country. Would Deutsche Welle have the right to say that, no, this is our material?
Certainly not. That's why I would have called the police. Even a minister or press officer is not allowed to do it. I am protected. I imagine that I'm protected, but I imagine more here than what I felt in Ankara. No, a minister is not allowed. Also, his press officer who did it is not allowed. The only authority which had the right to confiscate whatever would have been the police. And if they are doing a mistake in Germany, I would take a lawyer and we would discuss about this reaction and decision. And this is unimaginable today. However, in the case we had to live through.
It's interesting because you are comparing a little bit Germany and Turkey, Ankara and Berlin. And Alan Posner, at the top of the show, we had a quote from you where you were saying here in Germany, every newspaper article has to be subjected to or submitted for authorisation.
Not an article, every interview with a minister and a politician.
Every interview, good point, yeah, fair enough, yeah. But you seem to be suggesting with that quote that the press freedom applies in the same way in Germany as it does in Ankara and vice versa.
No, not in the same way. But Michel Friedman knows very well, because he had a series of interviews in our newspaper, Welt am Sonntag, a couple of years ago, where we didn't adhere to this rule, and the politicians knew it, or the people he interviewed knew it, but it never caught on. And the reason is that politicians want to control their image. I don't know if they would go so far as to confiscate you know, an interview was already in the can. I'm not saying it's the same thing. It's deplorable. But what I am saying is politicians try to control their image. Now, it would be unthinkable in America if you did an interview as a newspaper with Hillary Clinton or with the president, that they would say, well, you have to submit the quotes for authorization. It wouldn't happen. Or in Great Britain. It's a German thing. That's what I'm saying. There are differences in the freedom of the press and the authority that politicians have from country to country.
Let's get Gökçen Birli to comment on those differences between the freedom of the press, those nuances that are so important.
They are very important, actually, and it shows. For me, this is information that's new for me. I didn't know that the German media may have that right to check what you talk with the politicians, actually. But in the Turkish case, I think the thing that matters is the questions. I'm not sure how far did you get with during your interview, but I think you can be more. You can be more critical still in Germany because self-censorship is more effective now in Turkey.
I want to give a response to my dear friend Ellen. As I'm writing in newspapers too, and you just mentioned it, what you were painting about newspaper is not a must. It's an agreement who nobody really knows why and whatever it is. But we have to make a cut between an interview for a newspaper where you are talking 2-3 hours perhaps with the minister or prime minister and you are changing the questions and the answers like a puzzle. We are doing television, and in Germany, and I'm doing TV shows in Germany, nobody ever had the idea to confiscate an interview on TV or on radio. And why? Because our interviews are generally all live on tape, or even live, and even not. There was not one case that a politician asked the court to decide that an interview can't be broadcasted. And this is a deep difference in the examples, and I believe that this is in America, this is in Germany, and when I'm listening to the President Erdogan or to the Prime Minister before the coup, they told us that Turkey is a democracy. Yeah, well, so I have to judge on these values, and I think it was not done.
Gökçen, I'd like to hear your Orhan Pamuk, the Nobel Prize, the author who won the Literature Prize, the Nobel Prize. He came out and he said, not just the freedom of the press, but the freedom of thought no longer exists in Turkey. I need to know, is he right?
I think he is right.
What does that mean?
Especially after the July coup attempt, I think people are really afraid this time to tell out loud what they think. It's, of course, before the July coup attempt, Turkey was not a democracy already. Slowly, gradually, after the Gezi protest, I think Turkey switched sharply to an autocracy, and Erdogan's presidency was very strong, his power was consolidated, etc. But after the coup attempt, state of emergency changed things. So freedom of press is not present, but freedom of thought, people are afraid to express their critics. And those who do, they simply end up in prison. This is no joke. I mean, a lot of friends from academy, from journalism and writers, novelists are simply peace activists. They are in prison.
OK, well, let's have a very quick look. Let's just take a quick break from the debate and look at some of the figures about the crackdown in Turkey, which has led to Turkey being described by Reporters Without Borders as the world leader in imprisoning journalists. And the figures we're going to present now are supplied by the Committee to Protect Journalists.
At least 30 news-related websites were censored. More than 100 media outlets were closed, and more than 100 journalists were detained. Last year, Reporters Without Borders ranked Turkey 151st out of 180 countries on its World Press Freedom Index. Is Turkey carrying out a systematic campaign against the media?
a good question, Alan Posen. Is it a crack hunt, a witch down, or, you know, a far-reaching security measure?
Look, I don't know, right? But certain things have to be established. There was a coup attempt. There were hundreds of people killed. This coup attempt was faced down not by an authoritarian crackdown, it was faced down by the people of Turkey, and to this day, even the main opposition parties support the government in clamping down on this coup. Second thing is true, there were hundreds, if not thousands, of supporters of the coup in the judiciary, in the media, in the military, many of them supporters of Mr. Gulen in Pennsylvania, a radical Islamist, Islamic, I'd say, preacher. Now, if you consider Germany, for instance, after the 1968 revolt, people like me were going on the streets shouting Mao Zedong and all that kind of thing. We had Berufsverbote. We had tens of thousands of people not being allowed, you know, being controlled before they were allowed to take a job with the state, and so on and so on. So, we were nowhere near as powerful as Mr. Gulen was, the military was with this coup. We never attempted a coup. When you think of the hysterical reaction to the Red Army faction in the 70s, and I think we should be just a bit careful in the case of Turkey, where there really was a coup, where there is a powerful military, where there obviously was a so-called shadow state, you know, so I'm not happy with what's happening. I'm just saying, don't forget it.
Dr. Mbinli, what do you say?
We don't forget it. People do not forget this. Of course, the killing of hundreds of people on the coup attempt, during the coup attempt, and afterwards, still going on with these attempts, I think it was horrible. But on the other hand, peace activists, that has nothing to do with the Gulen movement, especially supporters of Kurdish peace process. Why are they then arrested? What do they have to? Do they have anything in common with the Gulen movement? They are anti-Gulenists. I mean, an academic and a journalist who is left-wing, who is just critical of the Erdogan government, could be blamed as a terrorist. I'm really curious about what terrorism means now in Turkey nowadays, because I think its definition has become so flexible that enables Erdogan to do what he has in mind. So,
and many members of the press and many members of the media have been arrested and detained. You said that some of them are your friends, people you know personally. Just give us an idea of what has happened to these people and what is going to happen to these people.
They have been arrested and put in jail. That's what happened. And the thing is, because people no longer believe, and I certainly also do, that law is not free in Turkey anymore, the courts are not free, I think somehow there is little hope in the future.
What is happening to these people in prison? Are they being tortured? Are they being abused?
There are reports and there are accusations of torture, but I'm not sure. I mean, nobody can go in there. For instance, Aslı Erdoğan, she's a novelist and she was on the editorial member team of Özgür Gündem, the Kurdish newspaper. She said that I was left without water for days. I was forced to sleep on a very dirty bed and they didn't give me medication. But afterwards, the government authorities all of a sudden say, no, we haven't done that. So you can't know who's telling the truth at the moment.
I think there is no legitimation for the coup. There is no doubt about that. But
it's an act of self-defense. This was Turkey's 9/11. Many people in Turkey argue.
But we have to remember that what is going on today happened before the coup and was on the same quality or non-quality of treating people in your country. When you remember all the demonstration last year, the reaction of the government, the reaction of President Erdogan, this was enough. This was enough to say, this is not the way how you treat your people in a democratic process of opposition, of peace movements, whatever. A third reaction, or a third response, I agree, and you said it, there are overreactions in such cases. But because of, before the coup, the behavior was more or less the same than after the coup against opposition. I'm not so sure if the argument is really the same one if in a country something happens, like in France, terrorism. There is a time of emergency. But in France, there is not one newspaper who was closed. There are no journalists who are in prison, and even they would have their civil rights. That's why I think we have to look at Turkey, and we have a lot of reasons, arguments to talk about not being superior in our arguments, but at the end of the day, hundreds and thousands of people are in prison. We don't know how long and since when. And there is one thing, Peter, you just mentioned. A lot of judges are now in prison. That means no court cases, no judges.
I'd like to pick up on that point because we've just been hearing that it's not just the media, it's not just the press that have been affected by the crackdown. Let's have a look at another case here.
Last week in the southeastern city of Diyarbakir, police broke up a protest by teachers, some of the 11,000 throughout the region who were suspended from their jobs last Thursday. The authorities said the teachers had either supported the Kurdish PKK rebel group or the Gulen movement. The government says that movement was behind the July coup attempt. Gulen denies any involvement.
There's no difference between the Gulen movement, the PKK, and the Islamic State group.
But these teachers say they are not criminals.
The government doesn't want secular, scientific, and democratic education.
This man was suspended for allegedly supporting the Gulen movement. Is Erdogan trying to limit freedom of speech and expression in Turkey?
Gökçen, what exactly does the Turkish government have to fear from academics and teachers?
Because they are educators of the next generation. There are still a lot of people living in Turkey. I mean, most of the people forget that half of Turkey haven't voted for Erdogan. So these teachers, these academics are responsible for the next generations. And he was very clear that he doesn't want critical minds. He only wants religious generations. So that's why I mean, it's a total plan, I think. It's not only media freedom, it's not only academic, it's not... If one wants power and with that power wants to change the direction of a country in a religious way, then you can't you can't stand different voices, different critics. So he's acting very cleverly.
And these people who are teachers of the next generation, are they all also members of the Gulen movement? Because this is what is insinuated, this is what is suggested by the authorities, that they are part of a conspiracy against the government.
Or more than 10,000 teachers were fired because they were believed to be supporters of PKK, the Kurdish movement. But, I mean, the problem is we don't know the truth yet. The courts are not working effectively, and there is no one who can tell us what is right and what is wrong. The coup has been, how many months have passed? And still, it's so foggy, and everyone says something, and we can't know who's a supporter of Gulen, supporter of PKK, or secularism. This state of emergency, of course, contributes to this confusion a lot. Because you can detain people and for 9 days without allowing him or her to see his lawyer or her lawyer.
I think you made an interesting point. We are listening that Gulen is a radical, a representative of a radical Islamism. My impression is that the Islamization is a part of President Erdogan's policy. If you are looking and if you are listening, how many arguments suddenly are backed by religious argumentations, if you see that certain symbols are getting a political and religion importance, we have to take care that this is also one of the points we have to take care. I don't say that this is a basic motive of him to do what he's doing, But if you are looking what is going on the streets and the country, you know that you have to take care that religion is not again misused for political issues.
Alan Posner.
Well, yeah, I disagree with both of you in that case, because if Erdogan really wanted to have an Islamic dictatorship in Turkey, he would not have broken with the Gulen movement, which, you know, we heard him saying that Gulen is just as bad as IS. Well, considering that he worked with Gulen until 4 or 5 years ago, where does that put him? If there was a plan, as you suggest, to transform Turkey from a semi-secular state into an Islamic state, as you are suggesting, then surely he wouldn't have broken with Gulen, who helped him get rid of the generals, who helped him get rid of the deep state in the Ergenekon trials and so on. So I think that by turning against Gulen, actually, Erdogan is now much more in the pocket of the generals than he was before. This is, you know, part of the strange constellations where we don't know who's controlling whom. And yeah, I'm not going to, you know, suggest that that it's correct to put thousands to dismiss thousands of teachers. But I will say that your first answer was right. We really don't know what's happening there, and I don't see a plan. I see a terrible confusion.
First of all, I didn't say Islamization of the country. It's more religious direction, I said. That's totally different. I mean, because Islamization or Islamic country, it's totally have very confusing connotations, I think, because there exists this Islamic state, this terrorist Islamic state. So in a more religious direction, I said. And I think this doesn't put Erdogan's war with Gulen doesn't tell us that he doesn't want similar things from religion. I mean, I think they are very alike. I mean, why did do we know today, for instance, why did they fall apart? Why? That's a very simple question.
It's a big open question.
Yes, and it's very simple and we don't know it.
But
so
again,
I think for the democratic, to be a democratic country, to be where human rights are respected and etc. Both groups, I think, are not interested in that.
It's only a few weeks ago, no coup in Turkey, and the authorities didn't handle situations like demonstrations, opposition, on the way how a democratic state would have to do. And we don't have to forget that, because it's a point which didn't stop. It continued. It had perhaps today a pretext to make more about that. But Erdogan's governments were not on the quality scale we are asking to respect oppositions, to respect people who are not accepting that you are the president. It's a democratic right of everybody.
Let's give Alan a chance to respond, but we're running out of time, unfortunately.
You're right, of course. But if Germany had a war on its borders like they have with Syria, if we had millions of refugees as they have in Turkey, if we had a civil war, it was the PKK who started the war, it wasn't Erdogan. And if we had the deep state generals conspiring to reintroduce Kemalism, then I don't know whether we would be so democratic.
With you, but this doesn't legitimate that we, sitting here in Berlin, are saying we can live with this. Because there are thousands in prisons who are in trouble.
I'd like to bring things slowly to a close and ask you the following question. We've seen what's happened in Turkey in the last couple of months. There's been a coup initially, then there's been a crackdown. An interesting question is, how should the West respond to this? How should Germany respond to this? Should Germany and should we respond by waving our fingers, taking the moral high ground and say we don't accept this, sanctions and so on? Or should we keep channels of communication open? Alan?
Keep channels of communication open, no sanctions, engage with Turkey and try to drag them back into Europe.
Gökçen.
I remember this refugee deal with Erdogan and how this actually move of European powers contributed to his power before the election. So I would expect the European countries to contribute to a more democratic Turkey, where human rights are respected, where freedom of thought is not sin, etc.
OK.
Look, Peter, we are communicating with countries like Russia and China. Why not with Turkey? And communication is every time better than not to talk. One of the ways we can communicate is to
the impression is
critics.
often that Mr. Erdogan is not listening to the West any longer.
It can be, it could be, it will be, but that's not the reason why we are not saying what we believe in.
OK. We're going to have to leave it there. I'm going to say thank you to all three of my guests for joining me today. Great stuff. I hope we've given you plenty of food for thought on the debate about press freedom in Turkey after the coup. If you've got something if you want to share the discussion with us, then do join us. Social media, on the internet. Until next week, bye-bye. Cheers.